Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rob Meikle.
All right. Well, thank you. Caught me off guard with that. Yes. Well, first and foremost, welcome. I don't take it lightly that you have all taken time out of your day to join us and be a part of the dialogue and the conversation, which I believe is very important when we talk about conversation. It's two-way. So I want to make sure I leave some sufficient amount of time that if there's any questions, that we can have some time for some dialogue. I've been thinking about this, and for some that have maybe, I see a few faces that were with me yesterday at the event, a CIO event, and I gave the closing keynote there. So there might be some overlapping points that I'll give today. But I began to think about today's session and the opportunity that is in front of us. And we've heard things like the first industrial revolution, second, third, fourth. But we're living in a time where technology is dominating our world. And I began to think, if we were to write the storybook and we were able to fast forward time 100 years from now, what would we be remembered by? And you think of agriculture and the development of the whole farming and agriculture industry. You think of the Industrial Revolution, manufacturing, et cetera. But really, what will this technology-enabled generation be remembered by? I got a quote that I'd like to read, which I think presents a proposition to us, if I may, ladies and gentlemen. It's from the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and he phrased it this way: the changes are so profound that from the perspective of human history, there has never been a time of greater promise or greater peril. I'd have to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, what are we a part of? Enabling the promise or contributing to the peril? He continued to express, the more we think about how to harness the technology revolution, the more we will examine ourselves and the underlying social models that these technologies embody and enable, and the more we will recognize the opportunity to shape the revolution in a manner that improves the state of the world. The City of Toronto, we're committed, really our purpose, and many of you heard me say this before, ultimately our purpose is to improve the quality of life for people that live, work, and play in the City of Toronto through economic prosperity, environmental sustainability, and social advocacy. But I really believe as we're increasingly becoming more of a digital world, for us as leaders, whether you're in the tech sector or not, we have a responsibility. There's some interesting statistics that are out there today, and it says that 1 in 8 of us struggle with technology addiction. Anybody in here? Anybody want to confess? We can work together. All right? Oh, we got a couple over there that are honest. Another statistic that blew my mind, and it said 10 years ago, 1 decade ago, the average attention span for us was 12 seconds. Now we have dropped down to 8 seconds. We are 1 second behind the goldfish. Another statistic, which I am going to ask for audience participation on this one as we become an increasingly digital city. My hand is already up, so you won't be the only one with your hand up. Statistics show that 75% of us, the first thing that we do when we wake up in the morning is check our, oh, we got a few hands up already, check our mobile phone. Anybody in that category with me? For the rest of you that are disciplined, I admire you, I honor you. For some of us that have an operational responsibility, we kind of check it and make sure everything is okay. What am I trying to say? We're living in a digital world, and it's changing the way that we interact. Cities have a tremendous opportunity. I bet you didn't know this, but 51% of the Canadian workforce is in the public sector. That now means that the majority of the workforce is the public sector. And so government is no longer just kind of this side sector, it's really an influencing sector. 51% of people currently live in cities globally. That number is going to grow to approximately 63% in 10 to 15 years. We are seeing the urbanization, the globalization of cities, but as cities continue to grow and evolve, we're also seeing the dependency on becoming more digital. We have to become more digital to deliver the information and the services that our citizens expect, but also to realize the operational and fiscal efficiencies, but also looking at ways of really the new paradigm on how we engage with citizens, businesses, visitors in our cities. The game has changed, the business model has changed, and the question is, are we introducing promise or are we creating peril? I know in my own personal life, I've seen the dynamic of my interaction, even with my own children, my own family, my friends. We're interacting and communicating differently. It's introducing a whole new set of skill sets, shall we say, perhaps arguably lack thereof, into our world. And so as a government, as a CIO, how do you take all of that to look beyond the shiny things called technology, even look beyond the flattery of data that is now dominating our conversation, and ultimately ask ourselves, are we contributing to the quality of life for people that live, work, and play in our cities? And so we've embarked on this journey at the City of Toronto in terms of making sure that we don't lose sight of the purpose and the focus. And so a lot of our solutions are really focused on, and it was really good for you to hear from our city manager in his opening remarks and his comments, and he's actually driving a cultural transformation within the City of Toronto where we can focus in on meaningful and measurable outcomes. And I really believe that the greatest opportunity, and when you think of it in terms of economic prosperity that will always exist in a capitalist-driven North American society, environmental sustainability is off to a great track, but I think the greatest opportunity that is in front of us is really social advocacy. How can technology be a part of driving towards digital inclusion and driving equity? And we're starting to see some overlaps in the correlation between digital equity and social economic advantage. We actually did a study called a Broadband assessment study, and what we did is we looked across the City of Toronto and we began to map in terms of looking at digital access. And for us, we define digital access as availability and affordability. Because if it's not affordable, then you really don't have access. And it's interesting here in this city of Toronto, 2.9 million people, over 200 cultural backgrounds, 140 plus languages that are spoken. We find out, surprise, surprise, that digital access is not equal across our geographical city. And then when we began to look a little bit more of that data, we began to recognize also that there is some correlation between digital access and some of our social economic data. In fact, where we saw digital access was limited, we also saw that tended to be some of our marginalized communities. And so we've set out now on a strategy in terms of, let's think big, let's think bold, let's think broad. It's not the traditional role of the CIO, which is about connecting the bits and the bytes, and we have some phenomenal stories that you're hearing about through some of these panels. But we're at this, what I call pivotal point and pivotal opportunity to say, well, what kind of decisions, what kind of strategic direction are we setting that won't just benefit us right now in my current role, not even just benefit us in this current term of council, but will actually leave a sustainable difference for generations to come? How many people in our world get that opportunity to actually make decisions or to be a part of something that you can say will have generational impact? I really believe as we start formulating digital strategies, technology strategies, smart city strategies, that is the opportunity that's in front of us. And so we've been really focused on that. We've been looking at creating not only our digital strategy, but creating a technology roadmap that will take us to the various outcomes that we're trying to achieve. Many have heard the term smart cities. Smart cities is using technology and data to drive efficiencies and improvements for the city. But I would like to tell you that smart cities is just a way of thinking. And the way that we think really affects really some of the decisions that we make, and the decisions we make affect how we act affects what we become. And so we're really looking at our strategies now in terms of looking at utilizing technology and data to drive not only digital inclusion, but to accelerate those outcomes. What has changed for us? In these technology roadmaps, and Grant talked on it a little bit earlier, we got to think differently in terms of even how we procure and introduce solutions. We're moving more to a culture not only of innovation, because innovation sounds really good, but really innovation means nothing unless you can deliver something. And in the culture of innovation and thinking differently and how we can improve things, what's changed is that we've moved to more of a culture of let's pilot something, proof it out, and then scale it later. This is a major shift really in government. I know it's for us in the city of Toronto. What we used to do traditionally is we'd spend about 1.5 years capturing all the requirements. We do this thing called fit gap. What do we have? What do we need? What's the gap? And then we'd spend another 1.5 years issuing an RFP, and then another 1.5 years negotiating the contract, and then a 1.5 years wondering if the solution will actually meet our needs. 5 years later sometimes. Not exaggerating. Those are some real timelines for some real complex enterprise-wide solutions. The city of Toronto is not a small organization. It is the largest city in Canada. Everybody knows that. Fourth largest in North America. 44 lines of businesses and divisions. The Toronto Public Service includes 70+ agencies, boards, and commissions. It is one of the most complex organizations I would petition to you actually in all of Canada. And so when we're trying to procure these solutions, it's easier said than done when you're trying to cover all of the bases. So part of our delivery in creating an agile and adaptive strategy and technology roadmap is how do we create an environment where we can introduce things really quickly, prove it out, develop the business case, and then scale accordingly. This is really key as we move forward. And as we look at that, it has forced us to continue to look at opportunities and leverage what's already in place. 86% of Canadian households have access to some sort of mobile service provider. So mobile is here. It's interesting, I heard another keynote speaker talking about really how we're engaging people, even from a retail perspective. And the speaker said that you have approximately 2.7 seconds to get somebody's attention when you are sharing information or trying to attract them for a service or a sale. The attention span in terms of really trying to grab people's attention has really been reduced. And then he went on to explain if you actually extrapolate those seconds, that equates to approximately 144 characters. Immediately, people began to think the form of engagement might be Twitter. But really, the message is the way that we are communicating with one another is not necessarily about Twitter. It's about shorter, and it's about digital. And I began to think about that. In my own life, digital communication has dominated, right? I mean, yeah, I'm on the phone a couple of times, but I normally tell you, text me first before you call me, right? I don't know, is anybody else like that? Don't just call me, text me first. Yeah, a few of us. I see a few sneaking hands under there. We'll try it one more time, a few of us, yeah? Right? If you call me directly without texting me, I'm not sure I'm going to pick up. Right? But if you text me, tell me you're going to call me, I might pick up. And I thought about it, a simple thing like that, how things have changed. And how we have changed, and as government, how we interact with citizens and businesses, things need to be shorter, concise, and impactful, and grabbing attention. So our digital strategy is more than just automating, more than just modernization and taking technology to enable, but it's really about transformation to talk about what does that business model look like, and so that we can advance the goals and the objectives of the city. Again, Grant mentioned we have some priority areas, whether it be housing, availability and affordability, mobility, moving people around the city, long-term fiscal plan, and modernizing, utilizing technology and improving our services. And so the opportunity in front of us is really to think differently. If I can summarize our digital strategy, our technology strategy, it's this very simple. We're trying to think differently. I've realized, I don't know if we have any millennials in the room, but if any millennials under 30 in the room, yeah, just sneak up your hand. I know most, yeah, no fake millennials. Real millennials in the room? Yeah, no fake millennials. Yeah, a few of you, raise your hands, yeah? No, yeah, there's only a few of you, right? Yeah, because I realize some of the millennials, outside of my 9-to-5 job, I work with some millennials, and they learn differently. So if you notice, we're not dominated, even though the millennials are the majority of the workforce right now. And when you look in this room, again, millennials, lift your hands in here, just do a simple count. 1, 2, 3, 4, tech team, 5, 6, 7, 8. Can we get to 10? 9, 10. All right, we'll round it up to 10. All right, 11. All right. And I've realized why I do that quick survey is that, even how we interact and learn has changed. And so part of our digital strategy and technology strategy is really about listening. And so we realize that mobility is out there. Cloud is one of our key abilities to be able to implement things quickly and scalable. We're looking at things, and you're going to hear a little bit later about artificial intelligence. You heard earlier about blockchain. We're looking at all these things, and what we've realized as we think differently, the ecosystem on the delivery of City of Toronto solutions won't necessarily all come from the CIO's organization. You heard from some of our partners, and so when we think differently, we begin to realize if we have a mindset of inclusion not only includes cultural and diversity inclusion, but includes, it implies that we're including small, medium-sized businesses, it includes nonprofits, it includes academics, it includes social groups, it includes different sectors. When we begin to think about inclusion, we begin to drive what I call award-winning solutions. Why do I say that? Industry studies have indicated that diverse and inclusive cities are the most prosperous cities. And so inclusion and diversity is more than cultural and gender for the City of Toronto. We are huge advocates and supporter of that. Don't get me wrong, I'm not minimizing that. But I think the opportunity is to scale that to another level in terms of how do we think and who do we include when we start thinking about solutions. And lo and behold, including the residents and the businesses as we begin to develop and introduce solutions for the City of Toronto. So we're focused on various technologies. They'll change over a period of time, but we're relentlessly focused on outcomes, meaningful and measurable outcomes that will continue to make the city prosperous. And so part of our plan is, as we are creating this technology roadmap to create that agile and adaptive organization, we are also actually embarking on redefining our IT operating model. And so what we're doing, and for some of my team members in the room, you might be hearing this maybe for the first time. If not, that's okay. What does an IT organization look like that's supporting a digital city? That's supporting a digital city where not all the data and technology assets reside in the city's data center. The very popular topic, which you've been reading in the headlines in the newspaper, Sidewalk Toronto. Sidewalk Toronto is a sister company with Google under Alphabet Labs. Here it is, a company arrives in Toronto waterfront, a very digital community. It's not the city's technology, it's not the city's data center, but they're collecting data about the city's residents. And they've had to quickly realize the power of inclusion. Right? And when they excluded the residents in that area in the dialogue in terms of what they're collecting, it kind of slowed them down. I think that's a good example of how we got to think different. How we have to think different is going to foster not only innovation, but also disruption in the area of our policies. A good case and an example of that is the ride-sharing economy. When AKA Uber showed up in town, our legislation wasn't ready for that. Yes, we implemented a whole bunch of technology to make that a digital citizen experience, but we had to modernize, innovate, and transform policies. We are experiencing the same thing right now when it comes to data. I like to tell people it's called disruptive data. Our policies don't fit in with the introduction of some of the data usages that want to occur in what we call this tech ecosystem. And so innovation goes beyond technology, beyond data, but for government especially, it really has to start with policy. And when we start looking at, do we have policies that are enabling the experience that we're trying to create to improve the quality of life for people that live, work, and play in the City of Toronto, then we start seeing game-changing solutions that are introduced in the city. So we've been very focused not to fall into the trap of chasing the shiny thing. I'm very thankful for all of our sponsors, and I have an opportunity oftentimes to meet in the tech ecosystem, and people have different solutions and products and services and all this cool stuff that it can do. And I always say to them, well, what outcome are you helping us solve? And that's really been the focus of our strategy, making sure that we never lose sight of the outcomes. And I think the greatest opportunity as we become a digital city is that we've got to make sure that we leave nobody behind. And there's tremendous amount of statistics that show that if we're not careful, we can create a digital divide. We introduced in May 31st of this year Digital Literacy Day to raise the awareness, because we want to make sure we're providing access, but also increasing digital literacy so that we give people an equal playing field and we don't leave anybody behind, because we understand that in order to move people from the margins to the mainstream, we've got to raise the level of literacy, not just digital literacy, but overall literacy, and so we can give people the added advantage. So the City of Toronto is great promise. But the reality is we also have great pressures. This statistic, which I'll leave with you and then open it up for questions if I have a little bit of time. The one statistic that blows me away for the city of Toronto is that 1 in 4 children live in poverty. 1 in 4. So that means if we go around our tables, 1 in 4 of our children live in poverty. Probably not in this room. So then what are we contributing to kind of ignoring that or being a part of the solution? So I think Toronto presents a lot of opportunities, but if we're not careful towards driving towards inclusion, we will create a divide that will have generational impact that our children's children may not be able to resolve. So when we think of a digital strategy, when we think of a technology strategy, we're really focused on outcomes that will make a meaningful difference, not just for today, but for generations to come. That's really what our strategy is about, and that's what we're focused on. All right. Good? Always a pleasure. Thank you, Jim. All right.